Hello, everyone. This is the Hidden Histories Collective. I'm LaChris Robinson Jordan, historian, genealogist, and filmmaker. And I'm here with my co host, Ryan Isom Underwood, and our guest, David Connolly.
Hi, welcome, David, to the show. Um, let me reintroduce myself. My name is Brian Isom Underwood, and I am a spiritual life coach, a family historian, and also a filmmaker. And um, and I started my journey um, years back as a kid, asking questions, collecting data. It's all about data in everything that we do. And so the elders die. Once they die, they leave with that data, that information, that word of mouth of what they saw with their own eyes. And so it's been imperative for me in my heritage and in my lineage to seek out truth uh, and just the whole history of my family lineage, because what's in the DNA, I can activate it. Once I understand what line of ancestry that I'm from and what lies deep in my DNA. So, that being said,
Yeah,
Chris, I pass it back to you.
thank you. And that is exactly why we're talking to David tonight. And David, you and I talked a lot,
Yes.
and you are the epitome of the family historian.
Okay.
And we are excited to talk to you tonight about your journey and
Excited,
everything you've
excited to be
done.
here.
And for the audience, you might hear us talking over each other because this is really going to be a robust conversation tonight. But you just want to dive right in, and David, just get started and say, please share with us about yourself. Tell us about yourself and how you got started on your journey, your family's journey.
All right. So I was born and reared in Northeast Ohio. So people from Ohio, they tend to be specific and say, oh, yeah, I'm from Northeast Ohio, or I'm from, the Columbus area, or from Cincinnati, Dayton area. But yeah, if people are from Northeast Ohio, we tend to say, yeah, we're from Northeast Ohio. So both sides of my family, they both migrated to Northeast Ohio. And as a child, you know, mainly from my maternal grandmother, we would ask, what was our ancestry? My grandmother always told us, Indian. She more specifically said, we're Indian on her father's side, meaning obviously my great grandfather. And, I remember at 17, I was over at an elder cousin's house. And this elder cousin was actually my grandmother's second cousin. And I remember asking her, I was, told that we were, Indian, what tribe? I believe that's the word I used. And like I said, I was about, I want to say, yes, 17 at the time. And I remember her telling me we're Wyandot. And I'm like, oh, okay. Now, being from Ohio, I had heard of the Wyandot people, but at that time, I just stuck it and put it in the back of my head. I didn't really do anything with it. So I remember I was working at a grocery store in my hometown, and a guy that I was working with, we were just talking about, from what I remember, history. I was 18, so this is over 20 years ago. And he said, well, I have a daughter that does genealogy. And I was like, oh, interesting. So this is back in, 90, 98. Yeah, 98, 99. Yeah, 99, I want to say. That was my actual first time doing genealogy. And I remember her finding information on my paternal or my maternal great grandfather's side pertaining to his family originally being from Maryland. And I remember telling my grandmother that, and she was like, no, I always thought they were from Pennsylvania. Well, come to find out that line they're Piscataway, Conoy, which people say Piscataway, but the real name to say the name of the nation is Piscataway, and Conoy is what they were called by the Haudenosaunee when they came into Ohio and Pennsylvania, and they actually, I guess you could say from what I remember reading, they had, I guess you could say, like a, what's the word? They weren't a confederacy, but they were in, I guess, good relationship with one another. I guess the Piscataway, they, had protection from the Haudenosaunee. So that part. But yeah, it was always, we were asking, and then I think what when it comes to me being a child, how it really came upon me is school. Obviously when you're around your family, you quote unquote typically see, people that look like you, right? But then when you enter school, and where I grew up in Northeast Ohio, it wasn't really diverse unless maybe you were in Cleveland, definitely Columbus because of, Ohio State, you know, but I remember I remember specifically a girl that I was in class with, and I remember her telling me her last name, the origin of the last name, and the last name, she was like, oh yeah, my grandparents or great grandparents, they were Dutch, and I'm like, okay. And then there was a young guy in the class. His mother was from Mexico. His father was Mexican, but born in the US. And then there was another young guy. His father was Chinese, and I think his mother was German ancestry, right? So then obviously you start thinking about, okay, where's the Netherlands? Where's China? Where's Mexico at, 5, 6, 7 years old? So then you go home, and quite naturally you're like, okay, so where are we from? You know? So like I said, my grandmother, and when my great aunts, her two sisters, were there at the house, they always told us that we were, Indian, and even on my father's side, my elder second cousin, from the time I can remember, she always told me that on Grandma Connolly's side, my great grandmother, were Blackfoot. Well, knowing what Blackfoot is, that is basically saying that, oh, you're from the Yesa people, which are the Sapani or the Okinichi or the Catawba, or one of the other, come to find out, like 32, 36 different bands of the Yesa people that inhabited Ohio, or present day Ohio, Pennsylvania, north parts of South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, and my folks are originally from North Carolina, Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, Ohio. And then also with my grandmother telling us, oh yeah, our family is from Canada. Well, the Wyandot, they originated out of present day Canada, and they originated more specifically out of present day Quebec City, Montreal area. And then they migrated, I guess you could say, west southwest to what we call present day Windsor, Ontario. And they, along with the Ottawa and the Potawatomi people, they founded Detroit. They're the founders of present day Detroit, Michigan. And then the ones that I descend from, they came into Ohio, and they lived in what is in the town still there. It's Upper Sandusky, Ohio. And so, yeah, I kind of went on my little ramble, but yeah.
Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's this is all historical information
Mm-hmm.
as it was told to you by your family.
Right.
So this is interesting, and I know it's a little off topic from, what we normally would talk about,
Mm-hmm.
but when you were going to school and you started hearing about slavery and Africa,
Mm-hmm.
what was going through your mind at that time as a child?
I always say what was going on through my mind at that time is because although we were told that we were, you know, Indian, we still identified as quote unquote being black. And if you identified with being quote unquote black, then you descended from these people that were brought over here as, you know, enslaved people from, you know, various parts of Western Central Africa. So I remember my dad, he lived in New York for about, oh, I think it was 7 8 years once he got out of the Navy, and he lived in Brooklyn. So his first wife is from Long Island, and my two older sisters from that side were born in New York. So we have a lot of family also in New York. And then my dad, you know, he had friends there. So we were going to New York a lot. And then Mr. Carl, his friend that he befriended when he first moved to New York, Mr. Carl was older than my dad, but they were really tight. Mr. Carl, he was from Kentucky and he lived in Harlem for years. And I think when he got out of the military, that's why he ended up in New York. But being in Harlem and seeing the, how can I say, like the pan African push, because this is like late 80s, early 90s. This is like 88, 89, 90, 91, right? And I'm seeing this, you know, so at that time, you know, Nelson Mandela was released, quote unquote, from prison. And then 92, you know, Spike Lee's movie about Malcolm X came out. And then, you know, Public Enemy was, you know, popular at that time. And Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she came out with her book, The ISIS Papers, at that time. So there was that Pan-African push at that time. And I'm, you know, 9, 10, 11 years old. And I was actually looking at a picture of myself last week of me having the African medallion on that I got in Harlem, right? So it was funny because, like, you know, with your question, it's like here our elders tell us, you know, what they know about our family. But then when we go to school, when we go to college, we listen to the teacher, we listen to the professor, because they're the one with the degree. So they're the one that has more knowledge than, you know, my grandmother and my grandfather and my great aunts and my great uncles and my elder cousins. See, so that's just obviously that's a part of the indoctrination and the brainwashing.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and we mentioned it too in one of the presentations. You were never black, and
Mm-hmm.
that goes into detail about how we were taken from our spaces and our families, and we were basically told, "Okay, here's the schools,"
Right.
and they call them now HBCUs. Now
Right.
you start learning all these different things about yourself. So
Right.
I've heard this time and time again where you're told by your grandparents and your great greats that this is who
Right.
you are, and then you get somewhere else in an academic setting, and you said, "No, that's not who you are."
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
fascinating.
And then yeah, when you look at, speaking of the HBCUs, I'll say this. So I'm a merchant marine, and for those that don't know what a merchant marine is someone that works on U.S. flagged ships, deep sea ships, or ships that work in the Gulf of Mexico or on the Mississippi, Ohio rivers. So the summer of 2018, I was on a car carrier, and I was on that vessel for 5 months. So during that 5 months, we were doing the same trip. We were going from Baltimore to Wilmington, North Carolina. And mind you, when I was in Wilmington, North Carolina, nobody peeped a word about the Wilmington, North Carolina massacre. So that's a side note, because every time I think about being there in Wilmington and hanging out there and meeting some of the, you know, our people that are, I'm sure, Tuscarora and some of
Mhm.
the other peoples that, you know, indigenous peoples from that area, nobody said anything, and I know why.
Yes.
But I just wanted to put that out there. And then, you know, we made a few stops in Savannah, and we went to Houston, and then back across the Atlantic to Morocco, to Germany, to Belgium, to England, and back. And crossing the Atlantic, and this is in the summertime. So from basically May, June until October, November is hurricane season. So I remember one specific day, it's a very calm day, and I'm looking out at the Atlantic, and a thought just came to me, and I said to myself, I said, this the transatlantic slave trade that we were taught, I said it didn't happen the way that we were told, because going across it was very calm. Coming back, we were leaving England and we were going to Baltimore. We were behind a hurricane. So being behind that hurricane, I said to myself while I was laying in my rack, as we call our beds on a ship, I said, there's no way that this transatlantic slave trade happened the way that we were taught, because who's going to transport people back and forth between land masses for 400 years, lose all this money, and when the people get there, they are sick because of bacteria getting passed around because of the obvious, you're shoulder to shoulder with someone. So you mean to tell me some fecal matter, some urine, not to gross anyone out, some, moon cycle blood. I mean, come on, people, like let's get real and let's think about these things. And then when you bring these people over to this continent, if you're constantly beating them and raping them like we were told, when do they get to learn about how to plant and harvest? And when do they get to learn about the fall, the winter, the spring, and the summer? Because that's not what it is over in present day Ghana or present day Nigeria or present day Cameroon. So through the indoctrinational system, which I call it the public fool system, they gave us this crock of crap. And unfortunately, I'll say most of our people still, believe it. It's one of those things where the indoctrination is so heavy and the psychology is so heavy, and how they obviously get you as a child, because that's when you obviously absorb the most information. And it is like, and I'll say this because I'm familiar with it, and I know a lot of other people are familiar with it, but the Bible, as we know it, it says not by power, not by might, but by the Spirit of the Lord, right? So all of this is by Spirit. So it goes back to your video that you did a few weeks ago. And like after you did that video, it hit me when you were talking about how these melanated and non-melanated Europeans came over here, and we have these spiritual contracts with these people, and we don't even recognize it because it's so commonplace, and we don't even think about it. And then when you did that video, I was like, damn, we intertwine with these people, right? We're intertwined with these people because we have procreated with some of these people, and we obviously have offspring. Some of us are even the offspring of some of these people, right? So it's just one of those things where this is spiritual. This is very, very, very spiritual. It's a spiritual warfare. That's what's going on.
All the time. And what's interesting is that when they came here, they knew they had to tie themselves to the land.
Right.
There's the other dynamic that is probably was whispered about many centuries ago. How do
Right.
they tie themselves to this land? And so that is when, and of course you have a whole bunch of men coming from these countries, and
right.
They don't have wives, they don't have
exactly.
women, so they naturally are going to procreate.
Right.
So
right.
By
Exactly.
and now happenstance.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating.
Yes.
Absolutely fascinating. So yeah, so I don't want to dominate because I know Brian.
No,
This
you're
is so
good. No,
fascinating. I love this.
You're good. I think when David, when you said, like you mentioned your grandmother, your aunts, all these women, it was the same thing with me. I think the women hold the secret. They hold the data.
Well, this is the thing. Sorry to cut you off, but
you good.
When I was listening to a sister, you all are probably familiar with her. Her name's Anita Wills. She wrote a book titled Along the Rappahannock, and she was talking about Queen Aliquippa, who was from the Haudenosaunee people. So Aliquippa is actually a town not too far from where I grew up, but it's in Pennsylvania. So it's on your way to Pittsburgh. So the thing is that they purposefully, and when I say they, the government purposefully got our sisters off, because when you look at our nations of people, it was the clan mothers, right? And then a lot of these women were chiefs, because I was actually talking to a guy who is Shawnee by email, because my ancestor married a Wyandot woman and a Shawnee woman. I come from the union of him and the Wyandot woman, but I have Shawnee relatives. And he was, pointing out that when you don't really see a lot of the women that were, chiefs or clan mothers or whatever. And I'm like, well, to me, that has to do with the patriarchy. They wanted to take care of that real quick, because they'll talk about how, oh, you are what your father is. And it's like, how is that possible? I didn't come out of my father's body. I came out of my mother's body, and everybody came out of their mother's body. So why did they put crack cocaine in Oakland, in LA, in Chicago, in Cleveland, in Philly, Baltimore, Miami, St. Louis, Memphis? They didn't send in, as far as I know, they didn't put any in Kalispell, Montana, or, Gunnison, Colorado, or, some other little town, because the fact of the matter is that they know that you're connected to this land. So any way that they can get you disconnected from the land by any means, they will. And the fabrication of a story to tell you that, oh, you came from some other landmass. And then when you talk to the people from that other landmass, they're going to tell you that, oh, I didn't start hearing about that until I got here. And you're like, huh? Okay.
Right. It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. The warfare is psychological.
Yes.
It's physical. It's also, there's bioweaponry in it.
Yes.
Also talking about we're only going to talk about the spiritual, and that's various levels, from getting you off of your out of your body. Literally, you are now learning a whole different religion, a different spiritual cosmology. You're also being told that your connection to Mother Nature is evil,
right?
It's witchcraft and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a whole lot of spiritual warfare there,
right?
So it was very concentrated. And of course, they take us and we fight amongst ourselves.
Right.
There's no way these Indian wars would have lasted as long as they did if we were not fighting each other.
Correct.
Yes. One thing that comes to mind right now, I'm thinking, um, uh, the spiritual warfare side of it is that if we were to know who we are, a large amount of us, it would awaken our DNA.
Indeed.
It would say, hey,
yes.
Yep.
Who are you talking? This is the land that my ancestors. And then the more we would start talking and we would start coming together.
Yes.
And awakening. So the DNA is asleep right now because of the lies, or I wouldn't say lie, I would say half truths. Half true. It's, the teachers teaching in school, it's like such a small of the pie. Right. And it's so minuscule that we took it as the whole pie.
Right. I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's interesting of how indigenous peoples around the world. I was watching a program a few months ago, and it was in Cambodia, and it showed people that look like people in our family. So see, that's the other thing. When you see these other, melanated peoples from other parts of the planet, they're trying to kill them off, just like they're trying to do it with us. But it seems like here the tactics have been, I'll say, a little more, because there's something special about the people in the Americas. Because I say that is because one man who we know as the godfather of soul, the hardest working man in show business, he said, I got soul and I'm super bad. You don't have anybody else on this planet that talks about the soul people except for when they're referring to North America. And how is it that you have a man like James Brown, like Michael Jackson, Prince, Sly Stone, Curtis Mayfield, Marvin Gaye, Isaac Hayes, Aretha Franklin, Shaka Khan, Patti LaBelle, Stephanie Mills? Where did they get those? Where did they get that from? Because I haven't seen people. Where's the Prince of Africa? Where's the Michael Jackson in Africa? Where's the James Brown in Africa? Where's the Whitney Houston in Africa? Where's the Aretha Franklin, the Shaka Khan?
And some of them, those artists you just mentioned, they also identify, at least, in latter years, that they were actually American Indian.
Exactly. Because they know it. Exactly.
They know it.
And they mimic us too. Other countries mimic us all
of course.
the time.
Of course.
No matter where you are in the world, we are mimicked like crazy.
Yes.
And I agree with you. We are special because the world looks at us.
Yes.
The African American, without the African American, well, I'm going to say African American,
right.
But without us, the heritage, the natives from this land that's in America right now, we are watched on what to do. We set the trends we set with trendsetters to the highest.
Exactly. Indeed. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. So it's just interesting time that we live in, the things that are going on. But going back to what you said, as far as like the elders, what and I'm thankful because I know that a lot of our people, a lot of their elders won't say anything just for the simple fact of traumas that they experienced and they don't want to talk about it. And that's okay. I get it. But I'm thankful that I had a mother and a father and, I'll say, my maternal grandmother, my maternal grandfather, my grandfather, he was quiet. That was just his personality. But I reached out to his niece like a year and a half ago, his eldest brother's daughter, because I wanted to know more about that side. And once again, I was asking her about my great grandmother, which is her grandmother, obviously. And she says, grandma was Indian. So she was from that great grandmother. She was from Charlotte, North Carolina area. So, it's funny. Even I reached out to some cousins in Pennsylvania, Beaver Falls area a year and a half ago, because when I was watching a video, I forget who it was, they were saying, reach out to your elders. Just reach out to your elders and get whatever information that they have. So I reached out to these other elders. They're on my direct maternal line. And their grandmother is like my great-great aunt. And they were like, oh, yeah, when we were coming up, she told us that we were Blackfoot. And it's like, oh, once again. So it's like, all of these family members, it's like, okay, pretty much, that's what our makeup is. Yeah, we do have European admixture. Of course, some of us do have, an ancestor or two from Africa. Everybody's family story is different.
Right.
And that's the other thing.
I'd love to ask this, David. You've interviewed so many people in your family, which is amazing. So, what were some of the challenges that you faced in your journey as you begin to ask questions? What were some of the things that popped up for you?
To be honest with you, really no challenges. It was basically getting details because, like I said, and I had mentioned this to you. So my mom, my grandmother, and a lot of people on that side of the family always talked about her two first cousins getting some type of compensation for being Indian, right? So these two first cousins, their father was one of my great-grandfather's brother, right? So when I went on to YouTube, or not YouTube, when I went on to Facebook, there's a family group page, and I, started posting this information about, how we're Wyandot and how we're, connected to them. This cousin, who her great grandfather would have been one of the ones getting compensation, she goes, "Oh, yeah, my great grandfather always, said that we, had Wyandot ancestry." And I'm like, okay, so that's another confirmation. And then when I asked her about, her great grandfather, no, her grandfather and her great uncle getting compensation, I said, I heard that ever since I was young. I said, "Is that a rumor?" And she was like, "No, that's true." And she was like, "Oh, my mom still probably has the paperwork." And I'm like, "Oh, wow." And then I actually reached out to her mom. It was either last year or the year before. And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I have information on our family being we sort." When she said that, I know what she meant, because the Piscataway, they were called we sort in Southern Maryland. And it was basically saying, oh, they're a combination or a quote unquote triracial group, and they're mixed of, Native American, European, and African. But, a lot of this triracial crap is not true, because we got similar hair texture to people have in Africa doesn't mean that we have African ancestry, because you'll find people in Fiji, Tahiti,
That's right.
the Philippines, Cambodia with the same type of hair texture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not specific to Africa, right? The same thing with complexion of skin. There were lighter complected American Indians before there was any type of, mixing going on. So,
What's fascinating about that, David,
mm-hmm.
and I said this to a friend not too long ago. We can go to
Mm-hmm.
any parts of the world and blend in.
Exactly. Exactly.
We could go to South America. We can go
Exactly.
to certain parts of Asia. We can go to the Middle East.
Right.
We can go to East India.
Right.
That's the
Yes.
thing about being melanin rich, is
Yes.
that there's no this all you guys came from Africa.
Right.
And people will talk about the scientific dynamic of, when it was Pangea or
Right.
Pangea, it was all together. But I still say, ultimately, in the end, how the heck are we still all over the world,
Right.
still
Exactly.
procreating, still
Exactly.
melanin rich?
Exactly. Exactly.
Come on, let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
that. But it's fascinating, so fascinating.
Indeed.
So
Dave, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
it's okay. I'm just so excited because one of the things I love about your work, David, is
Mm-hmm.
you're relentless.
Yeah. Well,
You're
this is my
indestructible.
personality, and this is the ancestors, because, those of us that are, I like to use the word spiritually cognizant,
Mm.
because this whole quote unquote woke term, that's a bandwagon term. But when you're spiritually cognizant of yourself, when you're spiritually cognizant of the half truths, as Brian mentioned, and the things that are going on in our world and the things that have been going on in our world, you know who you are, you know what time it is. And yeah, you're relentless, and it's like you're a freight train. You can't be stopped. And if somebody gets in your way, they're just going to get ran over. And that's on them. So, I know that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And now, as you mentioned it, see, I'm the historian for my family. So, I have some of these family members on this Facebook page still talking about, the DNA testing. Didn't find any quote unquote Native American in the DNA testing. Well, first of all, you're native to this land because you were born here, but you're an origine, autochthonous to this land, because by genealogy and by documentation, our family were First Nations people. So I don't care what anybody has to say. My ancestors' bones are buried in this soil, and their blood is in this soil. So I'm not going anywhere. Now, if you want to move somewhere because you have a desire or you're interested in living somewhere, but a lot of our people are doing that because they're escaping because they don't know that majority are connected to this land. So then they'll run to Africa and they'll get disappointed because they know that you're not from there. And then you come back here and then you're like, well, what do I do now? Well, I say to that, do your genealogy and find out where your people are from and who you are, instead of, running somewhere trying to assume someone's identity. Like, for an example, I was looking at, I think it was a billboard of a young brother who had graduated from somewhere, and he had the kente cloth around his neck. And it's like, okay, so you're from the Akan speaking people, because that's where it comes from. So to all these brothers and sisters that graduate from these historically, quote unquote, Black colleges and universities, or just graduate in general, if you're not descended from the Akan people, don't be wearing that kente cloth, because guess what? You're culturally appropriating. Just like you like to say, other people are culturally appropriating us. You don't, just because those people have the same hue as you, that doesn't mean that you're those people. See?
Right.
So you, as the saying goes, not all skin folk is kinfolk. You need to find out who you are as an individual and who your people are. That's all there is to it. Instead of assuming that I'm a Moor, or I'm a Hebrew Israelite, or I'm a whatever, because that's what you were told to do and to follow.
David, you hit it on the head. And, it's something that, we preach a lot here, is that there are different terms that people use,
Yes.
Aboriginal, the Indigenous, there's so many terms. But the bottom line is, yeah, you could be a Hebrew Israelite, you could be a Moor, you could be many different things.
Right.
But I say, can we just focus on learning our family history first?
Right.
Can we just get to that part? Can we
Yes.
do our genealogy, start knowing who our great greats are and our great greats are, and
Right.
really get that mastered? Because once you start getting things mastered, then you can start talking about the Hebrews, who, yes, people did speak Hebrew here. People spoke many different languages here. We can start getting broader in our education. We can start getting broader in the history. But if you just come out the gate and just start saying you're this, that, and the third, and you
Right.
can't really, you haven't mastered your family history.
Exactly.
What are we
That's,
talking about?
yeah, that's why I don't get into those discussions, because you'll have our people say, well, we're Hebrew Israelite. And it's like, okay, and what does that mean? Because that pertains to the transatlantic slave trade, right? So it's like, okay, so your people were the Hebrews that went into Africa, and then they were brought over here, so that makes us Hebrew Israelite. Okay, that's not genealogy. That's obviously someone's take on, okay, we're this and we're that. And it's like we're always something other than what you are. Just like when people say, for an example, I haven't gotten in a while, but a lot of people would think that I was Puerto Rican or Dominican because of my skin complexion. Right. And I would say, well, Roberto Clemente, he was Puerto Rican, and not all Puerto Ricans, not all Dominicans are lighter complected. Some are darker complected. And it's just that you look like, well, I look like my mother and my father because that's who I came from. And then I look like my grandparents, great grandparents, and so on in my family, of whose DNA I got, a little more of than the others, right? So, all of these things are obviously, programming. And we've been programmed, like you said, like you were programmed to think that you were Black. So you go around saying, oh, I'm Black. And then basically you're calling yourself you're nothing, because Black means death.
What does that mean? What country
right.
is Black from?
Exactly. What language do they speak in Blackistan? What do they eat in Blackistan?
Right.
I mean, yeah, what animals are in Blackistan? All of these different things, right? Yeah. So it's just the thing of, like, I was just watching brother Kerry Davis, and he did a video about how the reason why they got you to call yourself black is so they can get you disconnected from the land.
That's
So
right.
why is it like Brian said, we are special. So why is it that here in America, the so-called Black American, the so-called African American, why is it that they got to get you disconnected from this land? This blew my mind. Knowing that my ancestral territory is present-day Washington, D.C., and they use that land to do what they continue to do to us, autochthonous people here, and also those that are not, mind you, and then to do what they do around the world. So what it was, because the capital for the U.S. used to be in Philly,
Yes.
which is Lenape-Hoking, which is the territory of the Lenni Lenape people, which the Piscataway and the Nanticoke descend from. We're basically branches of the Lenape that settled in Maryland and Delaware. So we descend from those people. So what is it about Washington? What vibration, what energy is in Washington, D.C., where the Piscataway Confederacy, where they had their villages, where they had their seat of government, that the United States government, not the American government, by the way, the U.S. government, they function. There's something about that, right?
Well, you're talking about something that I mentioned I'm going to be talking about in my next video I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
drop. And when they first came here, when the Europeans first came here, they observed us and they observed our rituals, and it was actually quite frightening to them to see
Mm-hmm.
our rituals and to see some of the what they would call sacrifice and savagery and all that.
Mm-hmm.
What they didn't realize is that we were actually, in some instances, we were actually performing a lot of rituals around Mother Nature.
Right.
And so when they realized what some of that was, which they were watching our magic basically,
Mm-hmm.
they figured
Exactly.
it out and they just said, let's experiment. So of course they had to take us and they had to say, well, what is that magic? So it's so layered. I know there's many people who are more adept at communicating this than myself, but that is what you're talking about is
Mm-hmm.
they know because they
Right.
observed us when they came here. They
Exactly.
knew, they write in their diaries how scared they were and how savage we were. They were using that same knowledge against us.
And that's what they're doing. Just like you said. Now here, they'll tell you that, oh, doing whatever you do during, the equinoxes or the solstices or the different moon phases or whatever, right? They told us, oh, that's witchcraft. But then they'll turn around and you'll go on the meetup and you'll see that they got a group for it.
Sure do.
And you're like, oh, okay, but I was the quote unquote demon, I'm the devil, but you want to use my spirituality because you don't have any to basically become me, right? And then use my hoodoo, my magic, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
to your benefit or against me. And it's like, well, hold on. Now, what's that all about? So, like Brian said, like Brian said, I've said it, you said it, LaChris, so many of us said it. Everyone else knows who we are except for us. That's the crazy thing. Like everybody else knows that, oh, you're the American Indian, right? And you don't know who you are. You think you're from Africa because you put on, a piece of kente cloth around your neck when you graduate high school, or you paid what, $10,000-$15,000 to become initiated into Ifa, and now you're an Ian Ifa or a Babalawo, and you're connected to those aren't now you're connected to the Orisha. Now, is that a part of your bloodline? Is yeah, because the other thing is that a lot of us are we talk about being kings and queens from Africa, we're royalty and all that. No, as a matter of fact, you're descended from chiefs, male and female, from the Tuscarora or the Yamasee or the Choctaw or the Lenape or the Wyandot or whoever your people are. And you need to assume those positions. You need to assume those roles because that is your bloodline. And the thing is that it's going to be the indigenous people of this planet that get the planet back into balance to where it needs to be, is because we have the spirituality and we have the spirituality to do so. So when they talk about, the sun dance or the rain dance or whatever, you all go to the club and do that on Friday and Saturday night.
It's in the DNA.
It's in the DNA. Michael Jackson, he was doing the rain dance, the ghost dance in his performance. James Brown was doing it in his performance. Mm-hmm. Sly Stone, when he was doing the ham bone, what African you see doing the ham bone like Sly Stone? When I was watching Sly and the Family Stone at the Ohio State Fair in 1968, and Sly Stone up there doing the ham bone, what African you see doing the ham bone? What African you see doing what Sly Stone was able to do? None. And this is no disrespect to Africans, African people. It's that we've been told for so long that we are something that we're not. And then when we find out that we're not what we were told, then, okay, we want to find out more about who we are. It's not about disrespect and hate to anyone. It's about, like, for an example, when I was younger in, like in present day India, I found out about arranged marriage. And I was like, you know what? That's stupid. Why would you let someone arrange a marriage for you? You should be able to marry whoever you want. At 45 years old, that makes so much sense to me now. And you know what? They need to keep doing that, because who else knows you better than your mother and your father?
And here's the thing about that. When you think about our traditions, they were what kept us together. They were what kept us, moving forward, moving the society forward for centuries.
Yes.
For centuries.
And being in tune with nature, being in harmony with the cycles. They knew the cycles. They had the knowledge passed down, and and we just have to awaken it. As we dwindle down to this hour,
so much to talk about.
Why is it important for individuals? Do you think it's important for individuals to ask their elders while they're still alive to extract this data?
Yes, if you want to know, because the truth of the matter is a lot of our people, they don't care, and that's okay. That is okay. But for those of you that want to know who you are, you start, asking all of your elders. The elders that I reached out to in Pennsylvania, I met their mother when I want to say I was 7 or 8. I went over to Pennsylvania with my grandmother, her older sister, and her older sister's daughter. And I never saw those family members again. I just remembered their names, and I went to the white pages and I found their numbers and I called them, and we talked for like an hour. They were glad to talk to me. They asked about other family members that they hadn't seen in a while, some that they didn't know had transitioned. And I was just like, that was awesome to be able to do that. So if you really want to know, just start asking your elders, like, obviously start with yourself, but what counties in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Georgia, Florida are we from? And then, in a lot of the cases when you're driving in these towns, you're going to see a sign that says, welcome to whatever county, welcome to whatever city, and it will show you the name that the Aboriginal Americans called it. Though the names of the rivers in these places, a lot of them still have the, Aboriginal name in
Yes.
whatever language, in Georgia, in Alabama, in Virginia, and then when you say, oh, well, granddad, he was from Dinwiddie County, Virginia. Dinwiddie County. Who was in Dinwiddie County, Virginia? Oh, it looks like maybe the Sapani, maybe the Tuscarora were in that area. Okay, what are our surnames? Our surnames are Lomax and Richardson and Johnson or whatever. And then you find out like, oh, Richardson, that's a Sapani surname. Oh, you might be Sapani. And that's the other thing. Like a lot of these surnames are Aboriginal surnames Anglicanized. Just like when you see these folks that came over here from Poland or from Germany or from Italy or from Greece, they Anglicanized their surnames. So it's the same thing with us. Our surnames are actually our surnames. We didn't get them from no European slave owner. They belong to us. Yeah, in some instances, because of intermixing, they come from us. Like, say, for an example, Brian, his surname is Underwood. Okay, so maybe they live down under by the woods in Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi, wherever his people are from. And who were the people in that area? Well, you had the Yuchi, you had the quote unquote Creek, actually the Yamasee, you had the Chata, you had the Chickasaw, you had those people in that area. So, okay, highly probable that those are the people that I am also.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Chris did a genealogy on me, and one thing that we found was that a lot of the quote unquote slave records were the families trying keeping their family on the land so that they don't get sold off.
Wow.
That's right. I mean, the Underwood family, they owned hundreds of acres of land.
Now,
in Georgia,
now, Brian, okay, so your people were Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah.
Alabama.
Okay. They were not slaves.
I live right next to Black Creek.
Okay.
And we still say it. Hey, meet me down by Black Creek River.
Okay. Now, are your people Choctaw or Chickasaw?
Cherokee.
You're Chattagee people. Okay. Well, that's the other people
they
that
owned
were
everything. They were owners. Nobody enslaved them. I mean, some of them were, but when you look at all the brothers, these brothers had clusters of, like hundreds and hundreds of acres.
Okay. And
now,
see,
that's the other thing too. And not to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
One of the things that we have to remember is that a lot of the Europeans that came here, they came with nothing.
Right.
They married us. So that's why they have our names.
Right.
These are people who married us. They had children. So people have to tell the truth.
And that's the thing. Nobody wants
to. They got to tell the truth about where they came from and how they married the families and how they adopted these names and adopted the family. I mean, they're our relations, but they didn't really come over here. Oh, we're all set and ready to go. Now, some people did.
Right.
Some people did, but they married. They had to establish themselves on the land.
Well, you might as well say that's probably 90% of the Europeans, because when you see the old names and the old money and the old families here in America, like say for the Vanderbilts, the families that own these, breweries, like the Coors family, like all of these, like old money. Now, that's like a small percentage of Europeans that have been here for some time. The majority of these Europeans obviously didn't start coming over here until between 1890 and 1920. So they just got here, but they're going to look at you like, what are you doing here? And it's like, no, what are you doing here? Like, you'll see the license plate, Italian American. Okay, are you Italian or are you American? What is it? No disrespect to Italians But I'll say this is that, yeah, a lot of people, when they come over here, they do, not all, but a lot look down on us because of the propaganda. And it's like, okay, you came from nothing. So you all burnt down Wilmington, North Carolina because it was established. You all burned down Rosewood. You all, drowned. You created Lake Lanier because of the town that was there. Because I always focus on Tulsa, right? Yeah. But there were so many other towns. And then on top of that, there were towns that were established. There was a time that we lived in wigwams and longhouses, but we had established towns. That's why when you see the sign, founded by, it was founded by you because it was already established. And you came here and you saw what we built. So roads, irrigation, sewage, all of that was already here.
Even in terms of our living, the apartments and the way homes are structured, we already had those.
Yes.
I have a fascinating book. I said, oh, this is how they made apartments.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes.
And, to your point earlier, when you talk about people coming here and establishing themselves, a lot of this is people don't have this information. And that's why so many people are so ignorant, because a lot of this information is in these old books.
True.
We did the book on the John Ogilvy put together, which was of various sources in America. That's a lot of pushback, not as much as anticipated. Maybe 1% of the people who came to the page and to see the video, they said, "Oh, this is not true. You're trying to make this up. You're trying to make everything Afrocentric." And like, look, this is an 800 volume book. It's pulled from over 100 sources. What you want me to do?
Right.
Over 100 sources, these explorers, these Jesuit missionaries, all these people who came here. This is what they described.
Right. That's not
established
exactly
civilization.
Exactly.
We talk about First Nations, and don't get me started. We talk about the First Nations.
Right.
The line about they were first.
Right. Exactly. Because
if you're going to be honorable.
Well,
you were first.
Well, I know what you're talking about, because we'll say when you talk about west of the Mississippi, what was really known west of the Mississippi was present day California, because between present day California and the Mississippi River, that really wasn't known, right? So it's like, okay, when you look at the mid 1800s. Okay, so now you're known, and now you're documented.
Now you're documented. And here's the thing: as they were shipping the quote unquote Africans on the East Coast, what was going on the West Coast? You had Cortez and all of them messing with Montezuma.
Right.
Civilization. So when you look at the map and you start really breaking down the history, where all these people come from.
Right.
They're playing games.
Right. Exactly. Because the book that I have, Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico, right?
I haven't read that one.
You haven't read that one? And then when you look at, Anita Wills's book, Along the Rappahannock, where they took her ancestors to present day Antigua. So that's the other thing. So I'm going to say this. I'll say this. So about a year or so ago, there was that beef about, okay, who started hip hop? Right? If you all are familiar with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a public service announcement to you all that were trying to debate about who started hip hop. Okay. Kool Herc, he was born in Jamaica, right? So don't you all know that Jamaica, Trinidad, Grenada, those are America. That's America too. So, our brothers and sisters from Puerto Rico, they say we're Boricua. So that means that's the Spanish name for the name Borican, which is called Puerto Rico today. So they were taking people that were American Indians from the East Coast, by Tuscarora, Lenape, Narragansett, Pequot, Nanticoke. They were taking those people to those islands, and they were bringing those people, the Taino, the Carib, the Arawak from those islands, and they were bringing them here to mainland North America. So guess what? We're the same people. We're the same people that created hip hop because that's in our DNA. So we're from Trinidad and Tobago, or we're from Grenada, or we're from Jamaica, we're from Florida. You know what? We're essentially the same people because those islands belong. I don't want to say belong, but they're a part of the greater landmass of America, which obviously includes North, Central, and South America. Mm-hmm. So that's just what it is, folks. You know, as LaChris said, you know, we've been, as Brother Malcolm said, you've been had, you've been hoodwinked, and you've been bamboozled. And he said, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on you. So that means there was a rock that landed on you because you were on the land. And see, Brother Malcolm, when he came back, he started to say that you're indigenous. Or not indigenous, but you're aboriginal. You're autochthonous. See, because Brother Malcolm, he knew. See, so
a lot of them know, but they like history has always shown. We always are choosing the side that's going to screw us.
Yes, and a lot of
we think we're doing okay. We think, it's okay if we get with Cortez and we get all these thousands of our people and fight against one another and take over everything. Right. And in the end, what happens? We all lose. Right. We all lost.
Exactly. And then, of course, they got people that are melanated, but they're not from here. They're from Europe, or they just got that bad blood, and they are, you know, Aboriginal Americans, and they have been using them and their bloodlines to sell us out. Yeah, so obviously we have that saying, not all skin folk is kinfolk, for a reason. It's not that we're going to hate this person or hate that person, but once again, as the Bible will say, and I'm just using that because I know a lot of people are familiar with the Bible, it says you know a tree by the fruit that it bears. So if you got a banana tree bearing, you know, apples or peaches or oranges, well, there's something wrong, and you need to look at that, and you need to analyze that for what it really is.
That's right, all day long.
Yes. Wow. Yes.
Brian, do you have any follow-up questions? I mean, we can talk all day. This is amazing.
Let's keep talking.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions for David?
You know, David, I thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing all of your data that you've collected throughout the years, and thank you for holding on to it. Because as I am a family historian, one of the family historians in my family, it's not many of us doing the
right.
So and preserving this data,
right,
and carrying it forward and teaching others how to also seek this data, seek this knowledge, seek who they are, and carry it forward, and teach other people and share with other people of how to connect and to find out more about who they are. So I thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.